Hi, and thank you all for joining us today. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as you just heard, we're broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, which is 105.3 on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM in beautiful New Orleans. And please join in on the chat rooms. We absolutely love to hear from you. You'll be able to post questions and comments for our guest today. We love when you guys connect. And please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to whatever network you're on. We're airing all over the place. So wherever it is, I would appreciate if you went to YouTube, though, and found Ethereal Encounters Unveiled there and subscribed. It would be awesome. And a big thanks to the folks over managing the network, Michelle and others. I'm very grateful to them for all of their support. So today, just to quickly reiterate, we're confronting one of the most disturbing and thought-provoking topics in the world of mental health and spiritual well-being and warfare, actually. And it's about unseen entities, whether they're real or conscious forces. They just may be preying on human fear and suffering. So today, our guests are Jerry Marzinsky, who is a licensed mental health practitioner with over 35 years of experience working in psychiatric hospitals and prisons, and Judy Gregerson. I probably mispronounced her name. She'll have to correct that for us. She is an author and an advocate who has experienced spiritual oppression firsthand. And together they've written, They Feed on Fear, Breaking Free from Spiritual Oppression, which we will have the link to that book in the description of this video and running across the screen on Jerry's website where you can check it out. And this book challenges conventional psychiatric paradigms, and it dares to expose what they believe is a hidden war on human consciousness. Yikes. I mean, it's real. If you've ever questioned whether or not the voices that people hear are more like just hallucinations, or if you ever wondered if negative thought patterns might be seeded by something external, then this conversation is for you. So let's welcome Jerry and Judy. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Doing good.
Doing good.
Good. Let me get the ticker running across. Oh, that's the wrong ticker. Here we go. Okay. So as I said, we will have the links to where we can, locate you guys in the description of this video. And Jerry, your website, jerrymarzinsky.com, has everything on it that people need to know, right?
Yep. It's got a lot of information you're not going to find anywhere else on there, along with a lot of videotapes that we did with other people who've experienced these voices.
Okay, great. And just a little bit of a backstory. I had Jerry on, I think 2 times, Jerry. I might have had you on the show before. And we had some really riveting conversations about your work history and all the decades of experience that you have dealing with this topic. So maybe before we get to Judy, we could just kind of dial back a little bit, and I'll give you the screen for a minute or two, and you could kind of tell folks a little bit about your work so they have some grounding in what we're going to be talking about today. And also, folks, please join the chat. I know I said it before, but we really love it when you guys interact with us. So don't be shy, pop on in, post a comment or a question. All right, Jerry, I'm going to give you the floor and take me and Judy off for a second, okay?
Okay. So what I'm going to be talking to you today about, and I've already done a previous interview on this topic, is paranoid schizophrenia. It's one of the most disastrous, dangerous, murderous mental health diagnoses or conditions that exist. I mean, there's millions of people every year commit suicide due to paranoid schizophrenia and the voices that they hear. Okay? So I've been studying those voices for 35, 40 years. Okay. And eventually came to the conclusion that they are not hallucinations. These things are entities. They think, they plan, they're destructive, they're totally negative. They uh, tell the person that everything rotten that they could think of about them. You're stupid, you're ugly, you're crazy, nobody likes you. Um, your parents are pretending that they like you. Your husband's cheating on you. Your wife is cheating on you. Uh, it's all negative stuff. Mm. So one of the first things I found was that these things run patterns. Right? They run very predictable, repeatable patterns. Okay? Now the psychiatric mafia and big pharma have told you, and they're teaching this in the universities, that these voices that schizophrenics hear are hallucinations. Right? They have no research to back that up. They've not done any studies on it. They just like the old Egyptian priests of old. They just, we hereby declare that the voices are hallucinations because we said so. After studying them for decades, they run patterns. They're very malicious. They're much more dangerous than hallucinations. And some of the patterns they run is they're consistently negative. They they're derogatory, they're insulting, they're abusive, they're destructive. Uh, they may seem like helpers for a short period of time. They may tell the victim that, yeah, we're spirits and we can help you, or we're Jesus Christ, or they're consummate liars. They lie about everything. You know. One of the first things that kind of struck me when I went to work at one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals on the planet, Milledgeville State Hospital in Georgia, was that nobody on the staff was interested in trying to find out what these voices were telling these people. You know, and there was a one-to-one correlation between how much trouble they got into and how well they were listening to the voices. Right? So I started asking questions to these patients about what are the voices telling you? What are they? Um, and I ended up getting in trouble with psychiatry. One of the patients went and told the psychiatrist, "Hey, he's asking us questions about the voices, and I don't like this." So the next thing I knew, I was called up in front of the psychiatrist and told, "You will not ask these people about their voices, their hallucinations. All you're doing by asking them about them is reinforcing them, and you're making them worse." Right? Now I knew that was a lie at the time. That guy didn't know what the frick he was talking about. Um, but yeah, I had to watch it there because
Mhm.
psychiatrists were getting beat up by schizophrenics at the state hospital at a rate higher than virtually any other staff out there. Right? And I didn't know why that was because they were spending less time with these patients than almost anybody else out there. They were spending 15, 20 minutes a month, and they were being attacked at a rate as high as the people who were working 24 hours a day with them on the psych wards.
Mhm.
Why? What was going on there? I mean, what was happening there? I later found out 7 years later that the voices were telling these patients that the psychiatrist was poisoning them. And they were pointing to this awful side effects of these antipsychotic drugs as evidence that they were being poisoned. And
Yeah.
in one way, that's actually true. Those drugs are toxic. They actually, with long-term use, they shrink the brain. They cause permanent neurological damage, um, and they are toxic. So just another few of these patterns are they're anti-religious. They want nothing to do with preachers. They want nothing to do with churches. They want nothing to do with the person reading the Bible.
Yeah.
What kind of hallucination would do that? Makes no sense. They foster and they create negative emotion. So they're parasites. They will
Yeah.
they will batter the patient with all kinds of negative messages, and when they bring their vibrational level down, then they will suck them dry of their energy, and they will be depleted. You know, so they energetically drain their victims. Now I've got like 23 patterns that these voices run on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. You know, you don't have to listen to what the psychiatric mafia is telling you, that there's some kind of chemical imbalance of the brain. That's been disproven over and over and over again. It was made up by a drug company named Eli Lilly back in the 80s. It was okay.
Yeah.
So after the release of their landmark antidepressant Prozac, they came up with the idea that uh, mental illness was due to a chemical imbalance of the brain. And Eli Lilly advanced the chemical imbalance theory as a marketing scheme to sell their new drug Prozac. There was no demonstrable evidence showing that the depressed people had any imbalance. There's no demonstrable evidence to show that schizophrenics have any chemical imbalance of their brain. Before long, psychiatrists started using that as an explanation for what caused schizophrenia, even though they had no research on it. Not at all. They just made it up, and they're telling patients, well, you got a chemical imbalance of your brain, and that's what they're teaching in the universities based on nothing. There is no sound evidence for that. They haven't done any research on it whatsoever, and they're still doing it. It's a very hopeless message that they're giving to schizophrenics. You've got a brain imbalance. There's nothing you can do about it except take our toxic psychiatric drugs for the rest of your life that are
Yeah.
5 times more expensive than any other drug of the same kind sold in any other country.
Well, before we bring Judy on, and I'll have you explain why she's here to folks, but I just have a few questions for you.
Okay.
And like I said, we've talked about some of this stuff before, but I think it's worth, backtracking a little bit on. Is all mental illness, does it fall under this category, or is it just schizophrenia? Like, what about depression, anxiety? Are all
they all fall under the same category. It's these what happens is these entities, they put thoughts in the schizophrenic thought stream, and it's not like what you might think. It's not like we are the voices, blah, 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 blah. They sound just like the thousands of other thoughts that go through the patient's mind at any given time. All right.
So when schizophrenics say that they hear audible voices, that's not their own voice they're hearing, or is it?
They struggle with that. No, it's not. But it sounds the same.
It sounds
So
the
so
same.
they can inject these negative thoughts into the person's thought stream. Okay. And I've had a number of patients that would ask the voices, "Who are you? What are you?" And they would say, "We are you." They
Ah.
want the person to believe that those negative, destructive thoughts belong to them, which causes a lot of confusion.
Oh, so they're triggered. They're using trickery. Like,
Yes, they're liars. They're consummate liars. They lie about everything. You can't believe anything they say. What they want to do is upset the person.
yeah.
Because
Well, obviously, I mean, it destroys people.
yes,
Um,
once
so,
once they get them upset, then they can drain them.
right. So depression, anxiety. You believe that all mental illness falls under this spiritual oppression kind of area of expertise, like you've studied this for decades, or is that a separate thing entirely?
Well, it's connected. And I wouldn't say that all are, because we're working now with a cutting edge, brand new energetic psychotherapy that goes after negative energy that is buried in the subconscious mind, and it clears it. And
Yeah, what
once
is that called again?
it's called the MACE energy
Right,
method. It's
right, I
it's
did
it's
look
a
that up.
energetic psychotherapy, and
All right.
it works better than any other therapy I've ever seen, and I've been trained in a lot of them. When I saw this, I went, "This makes sense," and tried it out, and it actually worked, and it works very well, and it
All
has
right.
permanent results. It's not
Wow.
just temporary. The stuff does not come back. So we got two things going on here. We got these entities that are putting thoughts in people's mind. They are sensitive to that negative emotional energy that's built up in the person. So what they're attracted to is people who are violently, sexually, emotionally, or physically abused. So they're like sharks in the ocean that are smelling blood. So they target these people, and then they get in there and they pour gasoline on the fire, because that negative emotion is what they feed off of.
So that's their luge. Like that's what they're.
That's exactly right. That's their luge.
Okay, so all right, so it's not a chemical imbalance that you know for a fact, and medical science is still saying, even with fMRI machines where they're doing the brain scans, can they detect schizophrenia? Because I've seen video of that.
Well, they can detect the electrical signals from the voices. So they put these electrodes on there, and when the voices speak, they can see the electrical signals from the voices. And
With the machine, they
with
can
the
see
machine, yes.
Wow.
Yes. And it shows up just a split second before the person hears the voices. Yeah. So
Okay.
so they are there. I mean, and like I said, they're negative. And you look at what's going on in the Western mental health system. It's treating symptoms. It's not treating the cause of anything. Okay.
Correct.
So
Well, that's
these toxic drugs that they're
yeah,
feeding schizophrenics don't cure anything. They
right.
don't fix anything. All they do is suppress the symptoms. And these guys are making a fortune off of those drugs. The antipsychotic drug market in the United States is expected to reach 15.98 billion by
Wow.
2023. We're not saying million, billion. And these drugs don't cure anything. They tamp down symptoms. They don't get
Yeah.
at the cause of anything. The
Yeah.
global antipsychotic sales is expected to hit 14.54 billion in 2021 and expected
Shoot.
to reach 15.5 billion by 2022. Billion, 15.5 billion. That's what this is all about. It's about money. They will sell you anything that you will take.
Well, yeah, and I think it's about a lot more than money too. It's about controlling the masses and doping
Yes.
everybody up to the point
Yeah.
where they're incoherent and unable to function so that they can be on public assistance, and the Democrats love that. Not that I want to get into anything political.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But you look at the effect here.
Yeah.
50,000 people in the United States kill themselves every year. A good many of them are on antidepressants and antipsychotic drugs. There's
Yeah.
more psychiatrists, there's more psychologists, there's more antipsychotic drugs
Yeah.
or mental illness drugs available on this planet now than in the entire history of mankind, and the population is getting sicker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Schizophrenia is increasing every year. All these mental illnesses are increasing every year. The psych hospitals are loaded down. The mental health centers are overflowing. The
Yeah.
prisons are overflowing. And they're not doing anything about fixing this mental health system. It's a joke.
You know, and when we want to talk about that topic, let's just say that people decide to walk off the planet, you know, to keep it on the safe side. We'll use that verbiage. So yeah, okay. Now you've dedicated your life to this work. Do you have any colleagues that agree with you, and that aside from the, what is it called, MACE? No, what is that called? Yeah, MACE.
Yeah, Mace.
So aside from them, do
Well,
you have any?
I had one I was working with for a while. He worked in a state hospital up in Northern California. His name was Wilson Van Dusen. He wrote a book called The Presence of Other Worlds. Okay. And he was talking about this. So I met up with him probably 20 years ago. Okay. And we were just ecstatic when we met each other because we were both doing the same thing. But
Wow.
what he was doing was he was trying to make friends with the voices so he could learn about them. Okay. He didn't learn a whole lot that way. But one thing he did that was very interesting is he gave psychological tests, standardized psychological tests, like the cutting
Mhm.
edge of psychological tests, the MMPI and the Rorschach. He gave those independently to the patient and to the patient's voices. Okay? So he told them, he goes, okay, I'm giving you these tests. You answer them. Don't let your voices interfere. I want your profile. And then he went back and he said, okay, I'm giving these to the voices. So when he got the voices to agree to take them. And he scored them up. And the results were that the voices were much more psychotic than the actual patient.
Yeah, but there's hope, right, for schizophrenic patients. I mean,
Yeah,
so let's talk about Judy and how you met her and why she's here today, and then I'll bring her on.
Yeah. Okay. There is hope. The message that psychiatry is giving schizophrenics is a very depressing, hopeless message. You know, this is a life term. It's a life sentence. The only thing you can do is take these toxic drugs for the rest of your life. There's nothing else you can do. Pay us a tremendous amount of money, pay the pharmacist a tremendous amount of money, and just keep taking these drugs and feeling rotten for the rest of your life. All right. So there are a number of ways. Now, MACE energy method has gotten rid of the voices when the voices were weak, and in some cases moderate. In other cases, when the voices are very strong, the voices show up and they interfere with the process of running a MACE session. They will get them there and they go, don't do this, don't listen to this. We're not going to allow you to form an image. We're not going to allow you to do what you need to do to benefit from MACE. Right? But what MACE does is it takes out that negative emotional energy. It removes the memories of the trauma. Well, it doesn't remove the memory, but it actually removes the negative energy associated with traumas, which is what these things feed off of. And it will get rid of that same negative energy with OCD, with
Yeah.
depressed people, with neurotic people. Like I said, it works better than any other psychiatric therapy I've ever seen in my life, because your thoughts are energy, your body's energy, your spirit is energy, your memory is energy. It's all energy, and all psychiatry is doing is dumping chemicals on your brain to dope you up. They're not affecting the energy except lowering it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know what's interesting too, Jerry? I've been talking to a lot of people that are like either study demonology or occultism in some way. And even ufologists now are agreeing that a lot of what we're seeing in the skies is demonic, and it like disguises itself as angelic, and that there are these demonic forces that are tricksters and that are attacking us. So maybe there's a correlation there between what you've been studying for decades and now what we're seeing in the skies too.
Well, I know they do that because they presented to patients as, uh, "We're good spirits. We can help you out," and
Oh,
they know stuff that the other person couldn't know. I mean, when I was working with prisoners, I had groups that would tell me what the voices were telling them in real time, and they knew stuff. They were told stuff by the voices that there was no way they could know, especially with meth addicts. Meth addicts, when they ran out of meth, the voices would tell them where to be and when to be there, and virtually 100% of the time, somebody would show up with meth.
oh my
So I watched more people go psychotic from meth than
yeah,
any other drug out there.
toxic thing.
The
That
prisoners called meth the devil's drug.
yeah.
So
Well, anyway, you want to talk about Judy and how you met her, and we can get her on and she can tell her story because it's pretty riveting. I mean, I would love to
yeah,
hear it.
so what I wanted to do is, rather than listen to me just talk, because I wanted to bring on people who have experienced the voices and struggled with them, and let them tell their story of what these voices did to them, what it was like to be like the psychotic. Because psychiatrists don't spend any time with these people. They see them for half an hour, maybe an hour.
Sure.
How you feeling? How are your drugs doing? Are your drugs working? Oh no,
Right.
they're not working. Okay, we'll increase them or we'll decrease them. Or it's all about the drugs. They don't spend any time talking to the person, right? They will never spend enough time to listen to a story like Judy's story. Okay. So I wanted to bring on people who have been through it, who have listened to the voices, who have fought with the voices, who've struggled with the voices, who've been taken over by the voices, and how they resolved that.
Okay.
And Judy is very courageous, because there's a big stigma to talking about these things.
Yes, absolutely. It takes a lot of courage. Thank you, Judy, for being with us here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I love telling the story because I hope it'll help somebody.
It does.
Yeah. So you want me to go ahead?
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Okay. So I was listening to Jerry talk, and I want to divide this up into like 3 sections. The journey to schizophrenia, because these demons do know a lot about you, and they groom you to get you to a point where they can overtake you. then I want to tell you the story through it, what it was like to live through it day by day, and then how I got out of it. I was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic when I was 19. I was a sophomore in college. And my story started way back when I was a little kid. I grew up in a home with two alcoholics. My father was neglectful, emotionally neglectful, and brutal to my mother in the sense that he isolated her and kept her alcoholism so that he could go out and have his little affairs on the side. They fought night after night. My mother finally disintegrated when I was about 13 and sat in a corner one weekend and basically tried to drink herself off the planet and was taken away to a psych ward and then never came back. I didn't find out till many years later that my dad had basically cast her out and told nobody to help her. Nobody in the family was allowed to help her, give her money, take her in, do anything for her. And so she was just thrown basically to the wolves, ended up on welfare, and ended up being murdered when she was 53.
Oh, good Lord.
So growing up in that family, there was so much trauma. My mom was my best friend. I watched her disintegrate into alcoholism. It so traumatized me. And as I got to be about the age of 12, I began binge drinking. I also tried to take myself off the planet when I was 12. I got involved with older men. I got involved with married men. I would go away for the weekend. When I was 14, my dad didn't care. My mom wasn't home. She was gone. And I could pretty much do what I wanted to do. But I had developed a chip on my shoulder. I was angry. I was bitter. I was resentful. I had watched my family disintegrate. My sister, who was 2 years older, left, married a guy after 3 dates just to get out of there. My dad then remarried. My stepmother hated me. I ended up living with my mother for 3 days. That was a nightmare. Ended up then living with an aunt to finish my senior year of high school, and then eventually went off to college. So by the time I got to college, I had pretty much, I think, lost my identity. I didn't really know who I was. I didn't know where I was going. I was angry, but I didn't realize, I didn't know how angry I was inside. I was full of resentment. I was full of bitterness. I didn't want to cooperate with anything other than what I wanted to do. So when I went to college my first year, I got involved doing drugs and got involved with some people. We did a lot of LSD, tremendous amount of LSD that first year. And that had an impact on me. And that kind of, opened my mind. I thought that I had entered a new realm and I'd found something wonderful and I was going to find all this wisdom. And what happened was
Sorry, my dog's having a fit. Go ahead.
I ended up having a really, really bad trip. And on that trip, I actually heard a snap in my brain. I heard a snap. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've snapped. I've gone over the deep end. And up to that point, I had developed a tremendous amount of anxiety. I'd been involved with some bad people in high school who followed me to college, who threatened me. So I had fear, a lot of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I got done doing all that acid, by the end of my sophomore year, I had already attempted, by that time, another time to take myself off the planet because I didn't know how to deal with anything. I didn't know how to cope. I didn't know how to process emotion. And I didn't really feel. I didn't know what I felt. I could feel bad, but I could not identify emotions. I couldn't tell you I was angry. I didn't know what anger felt like. I couldn't
Was
tell
this
you.
after you heard the snap in your brain? Like,
Yeah, but all that had been developing over the years. So it was all coming to a head around that time.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like a big crescendo. And I didn't understand anything really about myself. I didn't understand how angry and bitter and resentful I was. And I felt, Carol Ann, like I was slipping away. I could feel myself slipping away. I don't know how to explain it other than I was I was becoming more and more distant from life. I don't know if I would call it withdrawal or what it was, but I went home that summer, took a waitressing job, and I started having these episodes where I'd be waitressing, carrying a tray with all these dishes, and suddenly I would mentally black out. And I would hear nothing, I would see nothing, and it was as if the world had stopped, and then boom, I'd be back in reality. And I didn't know what that was about. I didn't understand what was happening to me. But I felt like, okay, maybe I'm having a breakdown. Maybe that's what's happening to me. So I went back to college my sophomore year, and there was a guy that I'd known my freshman year that I very much loved. And he was a very popular guy, and I had no identity of myself. And I wanted to get so close to him that I felt like if I could get close enough to him, I could kind of absorb his personality or his identity. I wanted something to identify with because I had nothing of my own. And I really freaked him out. And I don't remember if it was before or after, but there was a point at which he was pulling away. And I was getting more and more depressed and more anxious and more feeling disconnected. And as he pulled away, around the time he pulled away, or when he left college, I don't remember which it was because it was a long time ago, I decided to take myself off the planet again and took a bottle of pills. So I took this bottle of pills, and I'm laying on my dorm bed, and all of a sudden I thought, if I don't do something, I'm going to die, and if I die, I'm going to go to hell. And it was so clear to me. It was like a voice speaking, in my head, not audible, but in my head. You're going to die. You're going to go to hell. Pick up the phone, call somebody. So I did, and they came and got me, and I ended up in the hospital with tubes and pulling tubes out of my throat and hitting nurses and all that.
So Judy, at that point, you didn't recognize that voice as separate from yourself. You thought it was your voice. You thought it was your thoughts.
I don't know what I thought about that. I knew it was intrusive.
Yeah.
I knew that, but I didn't know if it was my voice or not. And I don't think I thought much about it other than just to panic because I realized, I'm going to die, which was what I had planned. But it became a reality when that voice, spoke.
Yeah, see, and that's a struggle that a lot of schizophrenics have to go through. They think that voice is theirs because we think that any thought we have come through our head we think belongs to us.
Yeah,
that's way wrong. That's way wrong. When you start having these self-destructive thoughts, that's not innate to the spirit of the individual.
Jerry, so many people I've interviewed so many people too, that all of a sudden they get this invasive thought and they go, where did that come from? Like you'll hear a voice go kick your dog. And
right,
then
that's them.
I never kicked my dog. I love my dog.
Yep. They hit us all. They hit us all. It's not just schizophrenics. They're attracted to schizophrenics because of the massive amount of negative energy there.
Yes.
So they're attracted to that like sharks are attracted to blood.
Oh, yeah.
But they hit us all. And everybody experiences those intrusive thoughts that they know they wouldn't think. It's not who they are. It just doesn't fit.
Exactly. So, and then, I love the woman you worked with that uses the mantra, that's a lie.
Yeah.
I do that all the time now. Like when I get those stupid thoughts, I just go, that's a lie. That's a lie. And it goes right away.
Yeah. They have to get you to believe the lie in order to hook you. They're like fishermen. They'll throw out a bait, say, well, will she go for this crazy thought? Oh no, okay, they'll reel it back in, reload it with a different bait, throw it out there again. If you bite on it and you believe it, if you don't believe it, they can't get you.
Can't get you.
No, you have to believe their lies for them to get you.
Yes, that makes so much sense. Judy, I have to ask you, since LSD was involved and you did copious amounts of it, you think that had anything to do with your mental breakdown or, what came afterwards? Like, is there any connection you made with the LSD, the drugs?
At first when I first had my breakdown and was diagnosed, I thought the LSD had a part of it. As I look back, the LSD to me was a door. It was an opening. It was a way of inviting in this stuff. It was a portal that I walked through that allowed this stuff to come at me. Because when I overcame schizophrenia, there was, which happened literally over a period of time, and then in an instant, all that craziness was gone. It was gone. There was nothing broken in my brain.
Yeah.
And I'll share more about that, when we get to that part of the story. So, but I do think it had a part. It confused me. It set me on a path. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't going to school. It was slowly taking my life. It was taking over my life.
Yeah, they don't want you to sleep because that weakens you. So they want to keep you awake, and they usually hit. Matter of fact, a lot of schizophrenics say the voices get stronger when the sun goes down. And with geriatric patients, they call it sundowner syndrome. They start getting crazy when the sun goes down. Right? And then they hit the hardest between 3 and 4 in the morning when they wake you up and they won't let you get back to sleep. They don't want you to sleep because it weakens you. It weakens your resistance to them.
Yeah. And doing LSD did that. It broke me down in a lot of ways. Broke me down, I think, physically. It broke me down in a lot of ways mentally. Having that bad trip freaked me out so completely that from that day on, I doubted my sanity. I was convinced either I'd gone crazy or I was going crazy or I was going to go crazy. I felt like I had stepped one step too far. And in a sense I had. But it took, from that was around April or May, and it took until October for all this to kind of blow up. So what happened was after I ended up in the hospital, of course, if you try to off yourself, they put you in the mental health system. And I was put into the mental health system. And around that time, and actually right before that appointment, while I was waiting to go on that appointment with the psychiatrist, I was smoking a lot of pot. I was still smoking pot. And I was in my room laying on my dorm bed, and I was smoking pot, and I began to hallucinate or visualize or something, in my mind. And I saw a huge door, huge, big wooden door, like something in a medieval castle. It was big. And I thought, and when I was in LSD, I used to walk through portals. I'd been through portals. So I understood portals. And I thought, oh, it's a portal. No big deal. I've been through portals. I'd walked in them and I'd walked out of them. I didn't think anything of it. So I thought, well, I'll go. And in my mind, I went to that door and I opened it up and I walked through and when I walked through and I opened that door, the whole area was kind of a gray white. It was void. There was nothing there. It was like stepping into a void gray white space, light, just light, but not white light. It was a gray light. And I stood there, and in my mind, I shut the door behind me. And when I shut that door behind me, the voices started.
Carolyn, Judy, that's interesting because when I was learning about these things and finally came to the conclusion that they were entities and not some other kind of thing, it took years. I was in denial. I didn't want to believe that these things were demons, but I always visualized it as like Wilson Van Dusen cracked the door, the psychologist up in Northern California who was investigating these things. And I pushed it open and kind of put one foot in there. So it was like I had 1 foot in that world and 1 foot in this world. And there was stuff that was going on where I felt like I was crazy and there was nobody I could talk to about it. Crazy things were happening that didn't make any logical sense whatsoever. And I felt like I'm going crazy. And so I had like 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in that world.
Yeah.
And the only people who really understood the foot I had in that other world were the schizophrenics. They're the only ones I could talk to about this weird stuff I was experiencing. They understood. I couldn't talk to anybody in the regular real world about this stuff.
Oh, no. They would have locked you up if you...
Yeah, they would have. So I dare not talk to anybody I worked with either.
Well,
so, Judy, that moment when you said the voices like cracked open and started, what was that like for you? Like what, kind of give us some detail so we can try to understand what that felt like for you.
Well, there were, Carol Ann, 4 voices that spoke to me from 4 corners of my mind.
Oh my
One here, one here. 3 were male, 1 was female. And they began to torment me. They would say things like, and they would argue with each other over how crazy I was. They had this thing, because I was convinced I was going crazy before this happened. And the thing is, they know your weaknesses. They know what you're afraid of. They've studied you. They study you. They know everywhere to hit. So they knew exactly where to hit me. And the biggest thing for me was that I thought I was going crazy. And they told me my mother had gone crazy, therefore I had to go crazy, that there was no choice for me. But they would taunt me and they'd say, oh, look at her. She's just so nuts. And then another one say, oh, she's not nuts. Don't be mean to her. She's just.
So they would talk about you like in third person?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's common. Yes.
Yes. At first, that's what they did. And they would talk. Now, here's the other thing. They would talk, Carol Ann, so loud sometimes that if I went to the student union and sat where my friends all sat in between classes, if my friends around me were talking, I couldn't hear them because the voices in my head were so loud. And Jerry was saying, if they do EKGs, they can see the activity. Well, and I read a study once that the auditory part of the schizophrenic's brain lights up. Well, I can tell you why. Because they're screaming in your head. And so you can't hear anything else. But the screaming is a constant. You are worthless. You are worth nothing. You should not live. You should kill yourself. Nobody loves you. You're ugly. You're fat. There's no reason for you to live. There's nowhere for you to go. There is no life for you. Life for you is over. You're better off dead. And they went on 24 hours a day.
And that's common. So that was the first pattern I realized, is they're consistently negative. It's not random like they say it's auditory hallucinations. Hallucinations are all over the place. They're random. This stuff is not random. It's consistently negative, abusive, derogatory. So the question that needs to be asked, what holds them to that negative path? I mean, they don't stray from it. Why aren't they random? Why aren't they all over the place? Why are they just consistently negative?
So you've never had a client, a patient who had positive voices tell them, oh, you're a great person, you're so lovely. Nothing like that. It was all negative garbage.
It's very rare. And a lot of times it was when they were on the verge of killing themselves, something like that. Now I did speak to one voice that was from, it was the patient's mother. So he was hearing all these nasty voices, and when we finally got rid of those, his mother would show up every once in a while and talk to him. And I was real suspicious because these things can play like anybody.
Yeah,
they can play anybody, they can play that part. Yeah. And I was going, if they say one negative thing, I would have not trusted him. But I kept asking him, did you hear from your mother this week? Yeah, I heard from her. What'd she say? She said, well, wear clean underwear and take a shower and stay away from the gangsters and don't take drugs. I mean, the kind of stuff the mothers would say. And it never varied from that. So when he fully recovered, and I have a long story behind that too, but when he fully recovered, I was in the office with him one day and his mother showed up and he says, my mother wants to talk to you. And I went, oh, so what's she got to say? And he said, she's telling you, thank you for helping my son.
Oh.
And I asked her, I said, what are you doing over there? She said, I'm checking people in. And then I went to ask her another question. And she said, I'm not supposed to be talking to you. Everything you need to know is in the Bible. And then 2 weeks later, she disappeared and he never heard from her again.
What?
Yes, true story.
Crazy stuff. But Carol Ann, the other thing is that when these voices come, they have a presence. There is a presence with them, and it is a heavy, oppressive presence. Not only do they come as a presence, but my mind went into I don't know how to explain this to you. It goes into their dimension. So your mind is in one dimension, your body is in another dimension. So you're living in two worlds. So in the real world, you're doing what you have to do or what you think looks normal. And in this other world, you're in a battle 24 hours a day. Now, sometimes they would let up and they'd get quiet, but the presence was never gone. The oppression, I knew it was just a matter of whenever they decided to start screaming at me again. So you're living in that demonic dimension, which is an ugly dimension. There's no hope. There's no love. There's no faith. There's no help. There's no peace. It is 24 hours a day torture. It's hell.
Judy, my heart literally breaks for you. Not that you needed to, but just hearing the pain that you had to endure during, this challenging time in your life. Like, you must be a woman of great strength and courage to fight through this battle.
This is happening to millions of schizophrenics worldwide.
Yeah.
And the psychiatric mafia will not entertain that these voices are entities.
That's like criminal to me, Jerry. That sounds, it's like negligent. It's so negligent and criminal. But Judy, I want to ask you real quick about this portal thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear these voices and this oppression after you walked through this portal that you saw?
Mm-hmm. Well, the door, which I believe was a portal. I believe it was a portal in the spiritual dimension.
Was this like in your mind's eye, this portal, or did you physically see it?
I could see it in my mind. So it was like, how would I explain it? I mean, my eyes were closed. I was stoned, and I saw.
Right.
I saw this door, this big wooden door, and I decided to go through it. So I visualized myself going through it because, I'd done a lot of LSD. So in LSD, you're always visualizing and going off, and you see something and your mind follows it. The craziness of LSD, you follow it. And so I felt it was almost like that door was calling to me. It was like, come on. And I thought, okay, it'll be fun. It's just a portal. It's nothing. I'll walk in, I'll walk out. I didn't know I was never getting out. Because when that door shut, and they told me, you're never getting out. You're never getting out. We've got you. And
do you think LSD was like the gateway that led to your schizophrenia? Like, do you ever think about if you never did that it kind of put you in that state where it was easy for them to possess you?
My understanding, I'm a Christian, so my perspective, my worldview is Christian. My understanding in my worldview is that if you open the door to demons by drugs or with the occult or whatever, if you open that door, you're giving permission. When you give, because that is a no-go, okay, with God. So you open that door, you give permission. They are then allowed to come in if you open the door. I opened that door. So that made me vulnerable to them. And they took full advantage of it because they knew they could. Because it's allowed.
You said that they were in the four corners of your brain. How did you distinguish that? So were they different voices in the four corners, or like what was that like?
In the beginning, they were different voices. But when I finally got to the psychiatrist and he put me on drugs, he put me on 3 drugs, they melded into my voice, my thoughts, because the drugs just tamp it down. I mean, they turn you into basically a slug, or a piece of sponge. You're just bleh. And so it all melted down. But when I was first hearing them, I did a lot of thinking about it because I thought, what happened? I thought, okay, my mind shattered. I shattered my mind from all this LSD. These are parts of me, and these parts are talking to me. And I spent a lot of time figuring out how could I put these shattered pieces back together. But I never talked to anybody about it because, it's like when after I walked through that door, I was not quote, there anymore. And my roommate came home that afternoon or that evening, and I told her, I'm not here anymore. And she said, what do you mean you're not here anymore? And I said, I don't know how to explain it to you, but I'm not here anymore. And she said, where are you? I said, I don't know. I don't know where I am, but I'm not here anymore, because my mind was in this other dimension. And so they yelled and screamed at me in these very distinct voices, which then kind of melded into my own. And so my understanding was that these were my voices and they were parts of me. I must have thought I had masculine parts and feminine parts, and that I had shattered myself, and now they were trying to survive. This was
Jerry,
me.
is that common? Is what she's describing common in schizophrenics, like that melding from all that medication? You said it tampers you down, like, and the voices become your own. Is that a common trait?
Well, what I've seen is it doesn't get rid of them for the most part. You know, very rare where the medicine will get rid of the voices. And usually it's when it's just first starting. Okay? But the rest of the time, all it does is it just weakens them. Okay, so they're not as strong, they don't scream as loudly. And it just turns you, like Judy said, it turns you into kind of jello. You know, you're like a walking zombie. You're drugged up. You can't think straight. Your memory's all screwed up. You know, there's all these bad side effects going on from those drugs. So it's a hellish state in and of itself.
Oh, good Lord, I can imagine. So Judy, what's next? What happened next?
So, you know, I went on the drugs. I began then to try to live life. I was in college. I tried to live life. My dad found out from the hospital what I had done. So, of course, he came up to visit me, and he told me to just cut it out. Just stop it. And later on, he told me, you know, if you can't stop this, whatever it is you're doing, then I don't want to see you anymore. So my dad just tossed me to the wolves. So I began to just kind of try to live out this life, and I saw the psychiatrist, and I took the pills. And then soon after that, one day I was in the student union, and I was so, Caroline, I was so confused all the time. I was just confused.
How did you? College is so difficult as it is. Like, how did you organize your brain to go to school?
I hardly did. I ended up flunking out.
Yeah.
But I was sitting one day in the student union, and this woman, this tall, thin woman came walking toward me, and she kind of anchored her eyes on me, and I thought, oh crap, you know, what is this? So she came over. She was a Christian, and she said to me, you know, Jesus has a wonderful plan for your life. Well, that just ticked me off beyond you can't believe. I mean, it made me so angry. I thought, how dare she come up and tell me Jesus has a wonderful plan? I shouldn't know anything about me. Shouldn't know what hell I'm living in. And she's all grins and you know, so she starts reading me, you know, the gospel and about we're separated from God, from our sins, and Jesus died on the cross as a sacrifice so we can know God. And she said, you know, you can know God. You want to know God. And I don't remember what I said to her, but she had a little pamphlet she gave me. And at one point, I just got up and ran because I was so overwhelmed by that and by her thinking that she could come up and tell me that I could have this wonderful life. I thought, who do you think you are?
Well, see, this is another pattern that's consistent. These voices are anti-religious. They don't like people reading the Bible. They don't like them going to church. They hate the 23rd Psalm. I've had patients tell me that reading the 23rd Psalm, they react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
Oh, no kidding.
No kidding. So why would a hallucination be anti-religious? I mean, it makes no sense. You know, anybody who is schizophrenic, the voices will resist them going to church. It will resist them reading the Bible. It would resist them praying. It would resist them moving in any kind of positive spiritual direction. So here's again another thing that flies in the face of the psychiatric mafia, saying that these voices are hallucinations. Why would a hallucination be anti-religious consistently?
Exactly.
Why would it be negative consistently?
Yeah.
Why would it consistently drain these people of energy? I mean, this is all stuff that they're ignoring. The voices are the biggest single symptom of paranoid schizophrenia, and they haven't spent any time at all studying the voices. They just like the Egyptian priests of old. We hereby declare that these things are hallucinations because we said so, and we're psychiatrists. They got nothing to back it whatsoever. Zero.
I'll tell you, I was in a store the other day, and there was a fella behind me in line, and he was clearly schizophrenic, and he was the interesting, and I paid extra attention, like listening, because he was answering them verbally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they would say something to him, and then he would answer.
It's like one side of a telephone conversation.
Yes, and the look on his face, it was like there was a real person there talking to him. It blew me away when I saw that.
See, I noticed that too. When I got out of graduate school and just started working at the state hospital, they taught us that the voices were hallucinations. And that's all they'd say. They don't have any information about them because they never bothered to get any. So they don't know about any patterns. They just say they're hallucinations. So when you think about hallucinations, you think of like word cabbage or, just garbage. No, one of the first things I saw is what you saw.
Full-blown conversation.
Yep, full-blown, coherent, cohesive conversation. They were speaking to somebody, and they were getting answers. It was like listening to one side of a telephone conversation.
Yes, and it sketched me out, especially because we've spoken before. So I was more in tune to like paying attention. And this went on. I was in line for like 15, 20 minutes, and he was full-blown. And part of the conversation was almost like normal, talking about cooking something in the oven, and it was really like there was a human with him there. For a minute, I thought he had earbuds on, but there were no earbuds.
Yeah, that drove me crazy because after I got out of the working, at a certain point, after spending years with schizophrenics, when these earplug things come in where people they're talking to somebody over a telephone, you can't see it. I mean, it was like 3 years of like, oh, another one, another one, another one. It was like they're all over the place. And I didn't know about those earplug things at the time.
I thought that you had earbuds, but there were no earbuds.
Yeah. So that's what it's like.
Yes, absolutely.
So now I want to talk to you a little bit too, Caroline, about psychiatrists and what it's like to get a diagnosis like that. Because I don't think that people really understand what it's like. You go in, you sit down with a psychiatrist, they tell you, well, you got this chemical imbalance. That's what they told me. You have this chemical imbalance. And, we don't understand it. We don't know why. But you take these drugs and they're going to balance your serotonin, and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And they're going to help you. But what they're saying to you is your life is over. There's no hope. What a patient hears is, holy crap, there's no hope. There's no hope. My life is over. Yeah, I might as well die. That's what you
absolutely
hear.
Rotten.
There's no hope. There's no future. I had plans for my future. I think it's the reason I survived is because I had, as a very young girl, had made plans of what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was extremely loyal to protect myself and my plans, my dreams. And I met a counselor when I was in college, and she said to me, I've never met anybody in my life that's as loyal to themselves as you are. And she says, I think that's why you survived. And so...
Can I ask what they were?
My dreams, I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to be an advertising executive, and I wanted to be an editor, book editor, and I've done all three things.
Wow, good for you.
So I had that going for me in the midst of all this. That was a real strong part of me. So for me, it was like, okay, I got to hold on. So when this woman preached the gospel to me, I went back to my room and I took her a little booklet. She put her name and her phone number on it. I took the little booklet and I read it. And I thought, maybe this is true. Maybe there is a God. Maybe there's a God who loves me. And if he loves me, maybe he can help me. And I thought, well, I got nothing else going for me. I got nothing else. I tried drugs. That didn't work. It just made my life worse. Yes. So I called that woman up and I said, okay, I will accept Christ. I will become a Christian. And I thought that if I did that, I really thought this, Carol Ann, this is how crazy I was. I thought that if I did that, I'd go to bed and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be fine because God would heal me.
Right.
I mean, I really believed that. And so I accepted Christ. I became a Christian. I prayed and I went to bed. And when I woke up in the morning, nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. That was probably one of the most horrible days of my life because I thought, well, does God have favorites? You know,
Right.
am I not one of his favorites? Does he
Yeah.
not love me?
Yeah.
What did I do wrong? And with schizophrenia, there's so much shame and guilt anyway.
Oh, yeah.
I was not somebody that walked around verbally loud enough that anybody could hear me talking to the voices because I protected not looking crazy. That was like my number one thing was I was not going to look crazy. I knew how crazy I was, but I was not going to let anybody else know how crazy I was. And I still know people today that I know of people today that I knew back then that won't have anything to do with me because I scared them to death because of how crazy I was. You know,
It's so stigmatized. All of mental illness in and of itself is still very stigmatized.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care what anybody says. It's it is, and it's sad that it is
because they're scared.
Well, I didn't talk about this. I didn't talk about this publicly till I met Jerry. That was 50 years ago. This happened. This ended.
Oh,
50
wow.
years ago. 50 years ago. I didn't talk. I told a few friends. My husband knew. But I didn't talk about it publicly. I didn't write about it. I did write about it. I wrote a book in 1980 that Doubleday published about that. But I did not at that time I didn't fully understand what had happened to me. And they published it as a Christian memoir. But I understand the spiritual realm now in a way that I did not understand them. I understand demons in a way. I know how they work. I know how to deal with them. I know how to get rid of them in a way that I didn't know then, because that's become, in a sense, part of my life work as I work with people who are having problems, spiritual problems like that. So I protected myself by trying to look sane, and I got away with it a lot of the time, and sometimes I didn't get away with it at all. But I lived in those two realms. I went to school. I hung on. I went home at the end of the summer. I lived with my sister. By this point, I couldn't work, and I had to work for the summer. Lived with my older sister. She was so mad at me because I wouldn't work, and she didn't understand where I was at. She was like, "Just straighten up." That was the thing in my family. Straighten up. Stop acting like that. We had enough of that as kids with mom and dad acting out. You're not going to act out. So I stayed with her. I couldn't work. I drank the summer away with friends, just went to bars and drank, and then went back to school in the fall. And then I couldn't do school. So I called my father and asked him if I could come home. And his little heart opened up and he said, "Okay, you can come home." So I went home for a couple of months and worked in a oyster factory opening oysters, which is very rote work. And I could do that and I could sing. And that would keep me sane during the day. I would sing because there was so much noise in the factory, nobody could hear me. And then I went back to college. But by the time I got back to college, my junior year, the middle of my junior year, my life was winding down, and I was winding down, and I was exhausted. Jerry says, they suck the life out of you. When you're fighting constant negativity and darkness and oppression, and sometimes it's so overwhelming you can barely breathe. I had times when I was so confused, I'd look in the mirror. I wasn't sure it was me. I thought it probably was because I'd so lost my identity. I had blackouts of periods of time where one time I found myself in the New York State Thruway getting ready to drive into a bridge. And I'd been gone for 3 days. I don't know where I went. I went back to campus after that. I woke up before I drove into the bridge because I was blacked out, but I was driving. So, who was driving the car? I don't know. So I had been through this now for 3 years. I was exhausted. I was burned out. I'd had it. I was involved with some Jesus. It was during the Jesus movement. I was involved with some Jesus freaks. And that kind of gave me something to be rah-rah about, to hang out. I gave me people they were kind. They were nice people. They accepted me. My friend Susan, who had introduced me to Christianity, we stayed friends. She prayed for me. the weird thing was when I'd visit her, she lived in a different city. When I'd visit her and stay in her house, I would have moments of peace. I would have peace. Everything would quiet, and the
Wow.
would lift for moments, not hours, not minutes, but moments.
Moments.
So I knew there was something there in Christianity. I knew there was something there. But I didn't know what it was. I couldn't find it. And so my junior year came to an end. My grades got sent to my dad. He called me up and said, well, you finally did it. You destroyed your life. You flunked out of college. Don't come home. So by this time, I was on welfare. I was in the mental health system. I was in complete total despair. And I joined a sorority because I thought if I joined a sorority, that would help me. That just made it worse because now I have more people to deal with. So I went to live in the sorority. And it was the summer they were impeaching Nixon, and I sat on the couch and watched him, all the Nixon stuff on TV. And I realized, and at that point, I could barely feed myself. I couldn't cook, so I would make like a big pot of rice, and that's what I lived on for like the whole summer.
Wow.
Just a pot of rice at a time because I couldn't put it together to make a meal because I was disintegrating from this battle. This battle had just worn me out. It had eaten me up. So I decided one day that it was time to get off the planet. So I had a little Volkswagen Bug, and I went out back one night when everybody'd gone to bed and put a hose in the back of my car and turned on the car and just sat there and waited to leave. And my friend Debbie, I don't know how she knew, but she came running out screaming at me and opened the door and pulled me out and said, what are you doing? Do you want to die? And I looked at her and I said, yes, I want to die. I do want to die. And she dragged me back in the house. I went to bed, and I thought, well, I got to regroup. I got to find a new way to do this and a new place to do this. And I had heard about this secretarial school in this next city over. And so I went
were the voices telling you to kill yourself?
Well, that's what I was hearing in my head. It's time to go. I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. I've got to do this. I've got to kill myself. I got to get out of here. There is no other escape. There's no hope. There's no life. There's no future. There's no job. There's no way you can support yourself. You're better off gone.
Here's 50,000 people in the United States kill themselves every year, hearing thoughts similar to that. Where do those thoughts come from? They're not I mean, they fly in the face of one of the strongest instincts we have, which is survival.
Jerry, if these entities, if their goal is to not only torture you through years, but what's the end game for them? Have you ever, I'm sure you have, thought about like what their end game is? So you walk off the planet, right? Now, what do? Do they claim your soul? Do you think? Like, what's their, like, they won. They basically won and got what they wanted, right?
Yeah, they got what they wanted, but you might ask yourself, like, okay, they're telling the victim to kill themselves, and they're feeding off the victim. So, like parasites, I mean, what happens if the victim dies? Where do they get their food from?
That's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Like,
what happens is that when somebody commits suicide, the entire family and all the friends suffer. It's like, what could I have done? Why couldn't I know this? How come I didn't see this? I mean, I said something bad to them. It must have been, that might have caused it. I mean, they just start blaming themselves and feeling rotten. So it's like throwing a rock into a calm pond. There's these negative.
So the oppression continues.
It continues with other people.
It just passes to the family.
Now, what I've heard is somebody commits suicide, they got to come back here and do it all over again.
Yeah.
That's not acceptable on the other side.
Yeah. Good Lord. Okay, Judy, go ahead. So you ended up getting married, and like take us ahead some.
Well, let me tell you how I overcame this. I'll tell you that, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what I did, and I'll keep it short. I went to my psychiatrist, told him I'm done. I'm going to kill myself. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to the secretarial school. So he got me on vocational rehabilitation, got me into that school. I moved, lived in a house with a bunch of Christian women. I tried to commit myself to a psychiatric hospital in town. They wouldn't let me commit myself, but they agreed to see me. And I began to see this counselor. And he was the first person, Carol Ann, that actually sat and talked to me and listened to me and wanted to know about my trauma. And we began to open up that trauma. And as we opened that up, it was a horrifying 6 months or so to open up all that. And that was only a top layer, because I dealt with trauma for a long time in my life after that. But we dealt with that top layer. And as that top layer began to peel off, and I began to get all that hurt and that pain and that resentment and that bitterness and that anger and hatred. I had so much hatred for my family for forsaking me, so much hatred for my mother. And they feed on this stuff. They feed. And that's why I think I was a prime candidate, along with the drugs, was I had all this garbage in me. They love this garbage. It's sin. That's what we call it in Christianity. It's sin. It's the stuff that we do that's not good for us. It's just bad, overall bad for us. So we began to deal with that. And as we did that, things began to lighten up. And I began to feel almost normal. And I began to feel a sense of identity. And I began to be able to make relationships with people, which I hadn't been able to do. I hadn't been able to have relationships other than drinking buddies. Go out and drink. I could talk to them. That was it. And, we did that 3 times a week for months. And over that time, I began to get better and get better and get better. But the negativity and the oppression was still there. And the thoughts, a lot of the thoughts were still there. So I didn't know what to do. And I was still on the drugs. And I didn't know what to do next. So I went one Sunday to this charismatic Methodist church in town. And there was this woman from Philadelphia, this Black preacher. She was a cool lady. And I don't remember what she spoke about, but I remember sitting there thinking, she's got an answer for me. I need to talk to her. So I managed to get to visit with her after service. And I started telling her my story. And she listened for just a few minutes. And then she just put her hand up and she said, stop. And I was like, what? And she said, I'll tell you what you're dealing with. And I said, what? And she said, you're dealing with demons. These are demons, Judy. These are demons talking to you. And she explained, to me, in the Bible how there were demons and Jesus cast out demons. And she said, you're a believer. You belong to God. They have no power over you. They have no power over you. And I was like, okay. And I'd been reading the Bible, so I knew there were demons, and I knew Jesus cast out demons. But it was too, Caroline, it was too neat and clean. It's like, it's just demons. But she gave me this little book with a bunch of scriptures in it, and she said, I'll tell you what you do. When they come over you, because they come in waves. When it comes over you, and I'd be hit with just this panic and fear and paranoia. I had so much paranoia that somebody was coming to take me away.
Yeah.
She said, take this little book and read this scripture out loud to them and tell them, you don't own me. I don't belong to you. Get out of my life. Go away in the name of Jesus Christ. And I looked at her like, okay. And to be honest with you, I thought it was crazy. I really thought it was crazy. So, but I took the little book, and I didn't do anything right away, because then my counselor told me it's time to get off the drugs. You're doing better. You need to get off the drugs. And it was like, I don't know. And I thought, what if maybe I'm getting better because now the drugs are working? Because you get so brainwashed in the mental health system that these drugs they are God. They are your God. They are your saviors. They are what you need. You cannot ever get off these. So the idea of getting off them was
scary, right?
It was horrifying. But I decided, well, I've come this far, and so far things are getting better, so maybe I should do this. So I was thinking about that, but in the meantime, I'd go to work, and I was working at a newspaper, and I was typing computer code, and I would sit there, and these waves, the voices would come, and the paranoia and all of the garbage. And so one day I just thought, well, I'm going to do this. So I got up, grabbed my little book, ran to the ladies' room, locked myself in a little booth, made sure there's nobody in there, took out my book, started reading scripture to them. I told them, in the name of Jesus Christ, you don't own me. You can't have me. Get out. Get out. Jesus' name, go. And Carol Ann, like that, they left.
What?
The oppression left. The thoughts left. It vanished into air. And I was the way I was when I went to college.
What?
Emotionally, back of the pit, they were gone. But wait, it gets better. So I thought, well, this is great. It's over. Well, it wasn't over, because then the battle began. Then they began to test me. Do you really mean it? You really want us to go? And I spent a couple of months fighting that battle. And I can't tell you how many times at work I ran to the bathroom with that little book. And every time, Carol Ann, that I would read scripture to him and tell him, in the name of Jesus Christ, get out of here. You don't own me. You have no authority over me, and I'm not going to tolerate you. And the more I won, the stronger and the bolder I got, and the more angry I got at them for testing me. So I got really firm, what I was saying, and my faith began to grow. And every time they would leave.
Jerry,
So,
is this common? Like, do you
Yep.
have, yeah?
Yep. I've seen it. I've seen it over and over. These things don't like Christ. They don't like the Bible. They don't like preachers, and that's one of the things that first terms, it's like, okay, if there's negative, there's positive, they don't like anything that's positively spiritual. They don't like people reading the Bible. They don't like them going to church. Matter of fact, I did a little research study on the schizophrenics I had when I was at the state hospital. And I found out that if the voices are weak and they go to church, they often just disappear while the person's in church. If they're
Wow.
moderate strength, they actually get louder and they start mocking the preacher. They start telling the guy, well, Christ couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he's going to save you? And they just get louder and block out what the preacher's saying. If they're
Yeah.
really strong, the guy will just get up and run out of the church. They just run out.
But
Wow.
Carol Ann, they used to tell me, why do you believe in Jesus? He let them nail him to a cross. What kind of God is that? You want to know that God? He's a weakling. He was a weakling. He let them kill him. And they told me that for years, which is why I doubted, that God could help me, because that's how I saw Jesus it took me a long time to wipe that out of my head, because had that pounded into me for 3 years. So I fought that battle for a while, but in the middle of fighting that battle, I decided, okay, I'm going to get off the drugs. So I thought, I'm going the right direction. I'm going to beat all of this. So I got off the drugs. I just stopped cold. I don't know if that was good or bad.
Oh, I heard you're not supposed to do that. Is that right, Jerry?
Well, psychiatric drugs, it's not good to do that.
Yeah, well, that's what my counselor, and he didn't even have a master's degree, so he told me to get off them, and so I stopped cold, and I went into withdrawal.
Yeah.
And I had the shakes, and I had the sweats, and I had the paranoia and the fear and crawling up into a ball. And
I suspect they create those drugs to do that. So you will not get off them voluntarily.
Yeah. And I did. I went through withdrawal by myself in my room, called in sick, and I went through it by myself. I didn't tell anybody I was doing it, none of my roommates or anybody. But then, Carol Ann, on, I think it was April 14th, 1974, I woke up and I sat up in bed, and the sweats were gone, and the fear was gone, and the presence was gone, and my mind was clear, and I was free. And it was Easter morning, resurrection morning. I got my life back.
How old were you at the time? Around in your 20s?
I was 21.
So you were cured by the time you were saved, however you want to word it, but in your early 20s.
Yeah. But then, and Jerry will talk a lot about this, because he talks about Mesa, that trauma. What I didn't understand once I won that battle, I did not understand. I still had a lot of trauma in me, because we'd peeled off the top layer. I spent a lot of years peeling off the trauma. And I also spent a lot of years renewing my mind, because when you come out of that, I had 4 years of constant negatives. So it becomes a part of you. Everything you react negatively to everything, because that's all you've heard. And so I renewed my mind. I would sit and read the Bible for like 2, 3, 4 hours when I had time, just to put something positive in. And I'd read it and read it and read it. And eventually my mind began to change. My thoughts began to change. I began to believe the truth of who I was. But that was a battle that battle also took many years. And I think a part of the reason a lot of people don't recover from schizophrenia is that it's a long battle.
Judy, you've had several MACE sessions yourself. How did those work for you?
MACE was very interesting. In some ways, it's very subtle, but it has a way of peeling off undercurrents and peeling off layers. I didn't use it so much for trauma because by the time I found Jerry and MACE, I'd worked out and released pretty much, I would say pretty much all my trauma. But I still have issues. We all have issues, and we all still have negative stuff that we deal with. And but I found that it took some deep things and it released them. It's very subtle. My daughter did MACE about a relationship she had that was very nasty. And I asked her, what did you think? She goes, I don't know. She wouldn't talk about it for 2 months. One day she called him. She says, you know what? She says, that MACE work. She goes, when I think about this person or any person like this anymore, she goes, I'm just kind of like, okay, I got a problem, okay. Where before it was like,
MACE like cognitive therapy? Like what is it, talk therapy?
That's one of the closest things to it, but it's really not that close. It's not a talk therapy. Matter of fact, the therapist does not have to know what the trauma was for this to work. It works anyway. There's a number of times where I finished a session and I had no idea what happened to that person, but it was gone. Mm-hmm. It actually gets to the cause of the trauma, and it discharges that negative emotional energy that they're stuck with and that's upsetting their life. And it does it very quickly in about an hour. And it's lasting. It doesn't come back. Once that issue is gotten rid of, it doesn't return.
And you don't get locked into this for a lifetime, right? Like, no. do you have so many sessions, and that's it? Or
most people, at the most, maybe 3 sessions. Some people are done in 1. So it's not like you have to keep coming over and over and over again. Yeah. Because the issues are gone. They're actually gone. The person, like Judy was saying, you can remember what happened, but there's no emotional charge left in it. You just remember, okay, I went through that, and there's nothing. It doesn't upset you anymore. It's gone.
I have a woman that I counsel who is dealing with a lot of trauma and negativity from her childhood, and I met Jerry and I knew about MACE. I said to her, why don't you go do a MACE session? So she went and found a MACE practitioner. And she did a session, and she'd been a very unhappy, very uptight, anxious woman. And I saw her, I think the week after that. And I said, so how are you doing at the MACE session? She goes, oh my gosh, Judy, she said, all the negative undercurrent in my life is gone. It's just gone. She goes, I'm content. I'm peaceful.
Wow.
And I said, isn't it interesting? It's so subtle because it's not, you don't feel anything shift or whatever. I mean, you do during MACE, but it's just you're just different. The garbage is gone, and so you are you. You are who you really are.
Yeah, you're closer to who you really are.
Who you really are, rather than who this reactionary person is, and what you become when you get into this negative stuff. So I looked at her and I still counsel with her, and she's still content and
wow,
chill. So it's amazing what it does. I'm training now to do MACE.
Yeah, it is amazing. I've never seen anything work anywhere near as well as it does. I've got some videos on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com about MACE.
We'll have to definitely check them out.
Yeah, the information is available there.
Yeah, we'll definitely check them out. So, Judy, have you had any reoccurrences since then? I know, everybody has struggled, like you said, but have those voices ever come back? Has the oppression ever come back? Like, what's life been for you since?
Well, I mean, everybody has spiritual warfare. As a Christian, that's a normal part of life is dealing with spiritual warfare. But that stuff, no. The only time that I ever had a real problem was when my husband and I went through a very rough period in our marriage. And I was sitting in a chair one day, and I thought, I need to get off this planet, and I need to do this. And it was very tempting because I was so heartbroken over what had happened. And I sat for 4 hours and contemplated whether or not I was going to do that. And then I realized, what am I thinking?
Yeah.
And I just said, no, I'm not going there. That's not who I am. Boom. That's it. But no, none of that stuff's come back. It has, once you clear that stuff out, what I've learned in the spiritual realm is once you've won a battle, then that's your ground. You get to hold it. That ground cannot be taken from you. There's nothing that can come and take that ground from me. I have no fear of that. And I deal with women all the time with all kinds of negative emotions. And I tell them the same thing. When you win the ground and you win that spiritual battle, you win the ground, it's yours. They cannot take it again. They can come and tempt you. And all you have to say is, go. And they will go, because they know.
Now, I want to talk about these demonic forces to both of you. So I kind of want to open it up a little bit. Basically, these demonic forces, anybody can get attacked. There's no precursor really, or is trauma and events like that. Because I saw a video of like a 4-year-old girl with schizophrenia. And I'm sure you know that very well, Jerry. What in the world happened to this poor little child? That was she overtaken by demonic forces? Like, were her parents a gateway to allow this to happen? Like, do you think?
I've seen it when I was doing psych crisis in the emergency rooms. Most of my work was with adults, but when I went to work with the emergency rooms, I started getting called down to the pediatric unit to check out these kids, and sure enough, they were schizophrenic. How they got there, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I didn't think they could get to kids that early. You know, these were like 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. I had no idea how that happened or why it happened. I just saw that it does happen.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with generational curses.
Yeah, that's what I suspect.
Generational curses. I think it has a lot to do with it. I'll tell you a story about how they come for kids. When my oldest daughter was 2 years old, we lived in a house. We bought a house. We didn't know at the time it was haunted, and it was haunted. And it had a big, tall being with wings that I never saw, but my daughter, 2 years old, saw it and described it to me. But she had 9 spirits, 9 demons that came to her, and she named them. And she thought they were her imaginary friends. And she would go down to the fence down the hill on our property, and I'd see her talking to them, you know. And I'd say, "Who are you talking to?" You know, she's 2 years old. And she says, "I'm talking to Didos and Podos and Dodos." I said, "Well, Didos and Podos and Dodos." She said, "Well, they're my friends." And I said, "Well, who are they?" She says, "Well, I don't know." She says, "They come, they see me, and then they go away. They fly away." Oh. And so I called well, then they started telling her that she didn't have to do anything that I told her to do. And she came to me one day, and we were talking. And I said, "I want you to go clean your room or something." And she goes, "Oh no, I don't have to do that." And she wasn't being belligerent 2-year-old. She was just no, I don't have to do that. And I said, "Why?" I thought, this is going to be interesting. Why? She said, "Well, Podos told me I don't have to do anything you tell me to do." And I went, "Whoa, okay." Then she came to me one day, and I said, "What have you been doing?" She says, "Well, I was in the hall talking to the man in the hall." Now, mind you, the hall was like 15 feet from where we were standing, around the corner. And I said, "What man in the hallway?" You know, I'm getting chilled. What man? And she says to me, she stands there, 2 years old. She goes, "This big, tall black man with wings." She said, and he was in the hallway, and he told me, 2 years old, he told me he's going to cut you up into 1,000 pieces and stuff you under the bed. And he wanted to know if I wanted to watch. Now, this was a kid who had never watched anything dark. Never. But to her, it didn't mean anything. She was 2. She didn't know what it meant. And I just said, "Whoa." So I called a friend of mine whose son had been a Satanist. And I said to her, "What am I doing?" "Oh, then my house would fill up with smoke. And my house would shake like an earthquake." And I called my husband. I'd say, "The house shaking." My husband thought I was losing my mind. He really did. He thought I was losing my mind. Till one morning, the house shook when he was home. Just one bedroom of the house shook when he was there. So I called this friend up of mine, and I said, I don't know what to do. We found a child's gravestone buried upside down on our property. Somebody was putting amulets hanging on our outdoor lights. We found crystals buried on the four corners of the property.
I hope you moved out of there very expeditiously.
No, we didn't. Well, I called my friend. I said, what do I do? She said, go, when your daughter's sleeping, go in, anoint her with oil, and command all these things to leave in the name of Jesus, and do not come back. And I said, okay, we did that. In the morning, my daughter woke up. She didn't even remember that she'd had imaginary friends. God had totally removed them, because if she'd remembered, she would have gone to seek them. So God protected her. He took it out of her memory. So I said to her, what do we do about this house? And she said, anoint your doors and windows and command anything that's not of God to get out and not to come back. And we did. And on that day, it ended. It ended. The sulfur smell went away. It ended. And the house was peaceful until we sold it. We sold it. And then about a year later, I went to see people who bought it. And I said, well, what do you think about this house? And the woman said to me, well, she goes, it's fine except for that black thing that lives in the bathroom.
Oh, jeez.
And she said, I don't like it. She says, my husband thinks it's great. He loves it. She said, the first day we moved in the house, she said, I had my baby in the high chair and the mirror across the wall flew across the room and missed him by a couple inches. And she said, I don't like it. Well, she says, it scares me to death. Then she moved out. So I went to see the new owners. I said, what do you think about the house? I didn't tell her anything. She goes, well, that black thing in the bathroom. She says, I kept thinking when I was taking a bath that my son would come in and move things around on the counter. So one day I called and he didn't answer, and he told me he wasn't in the bathroom. She says, I opened, the shower curtain, and there it was. So it went back after we left, but it would not stay there. When we proclaimed the name of Jesus over that house, that thing fled and did not bother us ever again. And my daughter, to this day, does not remember.
Well, that's good.
So they come. She was 2 years old. They came for her, Carol Ann. They came. At night, things would fly around her room. Her stuffed animals would fly around the room. The walls in her room, the paint on her walls in her room peeled off in sheets. And she would stand in her crib and pull paint off. I've never seen paint peel off in sheets. And she would pull it off in sheets and throw it on the floor because her room was haunted. She slept with us for 2 years after that happened because of what went on. She wouldn't go in her room because of what had gone on, and it so traumatized her. And then we prayed over her, and the trauma left. So they come for children. And if a parent doesn't know what it is, they're in trouble.
Judy, do you have any doubt in your mind whatsoever that those voices you were hearing were hallucinations? I mean, do you believe that at all, or do you have any doubt that they were demons?
Oh, no.
None at all.
No doubt. No, the killer for me, Jerry, was when I told them to go in the name of Jesus Christ, and I read scripture to them because they hate scripture. And when they left, and when it cleared, everything cleared. The oppression left, the confusion left, the shame, the fear, the voices, everything left. I was clear after 4 years, totally clear. And then I realized this is not me. And that's what Evelyn Carter told me. She said, it's not you. Those voices are not you. I was convinced.
That's what schizophrenics need to understand. And they're not being told that. Matter of fact, psychiatry is telling them your brain is broken. Your mind is broken. You got to take these toxic drugs, which it poisons the mind even more, shrinks your brain like a freaking walnut, and destroys your peripheral nervous system.
Do either of you know other cases like yours, Judy, where through the power of religion and Jesus Christ, they were saved and cured?
Yeah, I've seen it.
You've seen it?
I've seen it.
I've heard of one other person. Somebody I met told me that they had met someone that had the same testimony I did, but I never found that person. I don't know who it is. Jerry's seen people. What I see, Carol Ann, and what I do is when I pray for people, like I have women come to me who might be severely depressed or anxious or have, I had one woman come to me, she had tremendous guilt because her daughter was autistic and she thought she had ruined her daughter and she'd lived with this guilt for 20 some years. And I said to her, why do you tolerate that? You're a Christian, you don't have to tolerate that. She says, well, it's my guilt. And I said, I don't think so. I said, so let's deal with this. So we prayed. We tore it down just in the name of Jesus Christ. I just tear down this girl. Go. Be gone. Leave her. You don't own her. Go. And we got to pray. She opened her eyes and she went, oh my God. She goes, I'm so light. It's gone. She
Wow.
said,
That's one of the fields with mace too. After you're done, they feel light and peaceful.
And it never came back. So I see it all the time in the ministry that I have, not with schizophrenia, but with negative emotions. I see it all the time.
Yeah, me too.
What can we do to protect ourselves and to stop these negative influences from getting us?
First, be aware that they're there. You know, be aware that not all thoughts that come through your mind belong to you. Matter of fact, Emanuel Swedenborg, a Christian mystic, lived 300 years ago. He said, none of your thoughts are yours. They either come from heaven or they come from hell. And you evaluate the thought. You get a negative thought. You go, is that my intention for myself? Is that what I want for me? Do I want to put myself down like that? Is that my intention? Or is that the intention of something or someone else?
Yeah, because not everybody is religious or spiritual.
Right.
And I would imagine that, there's got to be hope for them too. There's got to be not everybody is open to saying like what Judy just talked about, how accepting Jesus and praying. So there's got to be hope for these other people, Jerry. Like, what do you do?
Just realize that those thoughts are not them. They're not. They don't come from them. They don't belong to them. They're not part of their intention for themselves. The other thing that they can do is sign up for a mace session.
Yeah.
Do you remember John Nash, the guy that they did the movie A Beautiful Mind?
Yeah.
In the movie.
He overcame schizophrenia. He was not religious. He overcame it when he decided he didn't want to listen to him anymore. And he told him, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And he overcame schizophrenia. He just said, nope, I'm not playing that game anymore with you. I don't know how he came to the realization that they were not his voices, but somehow he did.
He was brilliant to be.
Yeah. But he figured out they weren't his voices, and he overcame them by telling them, no. There's a lot that has to do with what we invite in and what we allow.
Yes.
I've learned there are many things that come to us. We can allow them in if we want. Right. I could allow depression in. I could allow anxiety in. You got to stop it at the door. And a lot of people think whatever comes to them, they have to take in. They have to act it out. And you don't.
No, you can say, stop it.
No, you stop it. You stop it at the door and you say no. So these voices come and tell you, oh, you're stupid. You say no. Like Jerry does. It's a lot.
Well, the other thing that works really well is Sherry, our co-author on our book. She came up with something called the That's a Lie program.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Yep. If you believe what they're telling you, they got you. You know, and they're consummate liars. They lie about everything and everyone. I remember one patient, they told him, if you gouge out your eye, we will go away and we won't come back.
Oh.
So he gouged out his eye. And what they did is returned right away and they started mocking him. Now you're a freak. Now nobody can stand being around you. Now you're really ugly. You're so stupid for listening to us. So that's the kind of things you're dealing with. These are demons. And, you know, Jesus wrote, 23 times Jesus cast out these demons out of people. And what's happening with Christians today? I mean, the churches aren't talking about these things.
I don't know.
They're out there, you know, they're dangerous. They're the ones they're the things that are causing all the problems. It's not the good spirits that are causing problems. It's these bad ones.
Gosh, that's so true. You know, and I always have to remind myself that I was strong enough to get through what I did. My husband passed away 3.5 years ago, and we were married for 47 years. So it was a real, and still is, you know, a tough time in my life. And I never had a thought that I didn't want to be on the planet anymore. Never in my entire life, ever, regardless of any problems I've ever had to navigate. Well, all of a sudden, shortly after that, I started hearing in my own voice, my own thoughts, you know, your husband's not here anymore. You don't need to be here either. You lived long enough. You know, you should leave. Like those kind of voices.
That wasn't you.
No, and I knew that. I knew that wasn't me, but these things harassed me every day, Jerry. Every day.
And they
Telling
sound just like your regular thoughts, right?
yes.
Yep, that's what spooked me was when I found out that they
Yeah.
sound just like the other thousands of
They
thoughts
do.
that go through your mind on a normal day, for
And
the most part.
I just had to fight it every day and say, you're a liar. That's not me. And my husband would be so mad at me if I did that. Like I talked to myself through the belief that it was just all lies. And eventually they just stopped and went away.
Mhm. They will test you. One thing
Yeah.
I forgot to tell you is when I was schizophrenic, they told me to kill someone. They told me to kill a friend of mine.
Oh my good Lord.
Not
that, but it amazes me. It amazes me. They have there's no stopping them when they get started.
No, they will. They'll take you as far as they can take you. They'll test you to see what you can do. But they told me to pick up a lamp and smash my friend's brain in.
Oh
Because
my!
he was the guy that had gotten me into LSD, and they told me he's the one that had ruined my mind. And I had enough sense of myself, and I had enough integrity and morals that was not the way I was going to go. I was somebody who would take myself off the planet, but I loved people. I would never hurt anybody. But they tested me to see if I would, and they would have been happy if I did.
Yes, that's how a lot of prisoners get in prison.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Because they don't have
those negative entities own the prison. That's their territory. You
Oh
can
yeah.
feel it. As soon as you stepped on the grounds in the prison, you could feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I went on, and I've had a great life. I left that stuff behind me. I got married. I've got 2 kids. I've had several careers. I've published. I have another book. I have a book on this story. I decided to write this story down, and it's a quick book. It's only 100 pages, so people can read it in an hour. And it'll be on Amazon on Monday. It's called The Terrible Years. And
you could go in the private chat and send me the link, and I'll make sure I put it in there's a little icon for private chat. You can text me that link, and I'll make sure I put it in the description there. Or you can.
I don't have a link for it yet because it won't go up until Monday, but I'll get you a link.
Judy?
Huh?
Do you have a website?
Yeah, I do. I can give you that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Sherry and I wrote this book about how we came to the conclusion that these voices were actually demons and not hallucinations. Sherry's kind of like Judy. She heard these voices when she was young. They tried to kill her also. She's the one that came up with the That's a Lie program.
Yeah.
So you can get this at our website at jerrymarzinsky.com, or you can get it on Amazon.
Cover's really nice, Jerry.
Yeah, what happened there is some lady from France, while we were writing this thing, showed up and said, your cover stinks. I'll help you just develop a good one. I mean, just volunteered out of thin air.
Jeez. Yeah, it's really nice. Really nice. Oh boy. Anything in closing that you can recommend? I know you said, Jerry, don't believe the lies and, keep fighting and saying that's a lie, that's a lie. What else can we do against this spiritual oppression to protect ourselves?
Watch your thoughts.
Watch your thoughts.
Know that they're not all yours. Stay away from all negative stuff. Don't read murder mysteries. Don't read.
Oh, really?
Oh no, that feeds them.
Yeah.
Don't read any of that. Those police stories and murder mysteries and all that kind of garbage.
So they like that douche. They like the fear.
Yep, they love it. They feed off of that.
The other thing that was so important for me was learning how to forgive.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Forgiveness for me was so liberating when I began to forgive my family and my friends and the world and everybody I thought had failed me and myself. Tremendous freedom came. Not holding unforgiveness in your heart is food for them. It's like giving them kibbles. They come looking for it. Forgiveness is a big, big, big thing. in the spiritual realm. Big thing. And I work so hard now in my life that if something happens and somebody ticks me off, to quickly let go of it. I won't carry it anymore because
Carry it, yeah.
it doesn't, if I carry it for a minute or a few minutes, I start to feel that darkness comes. It'll encroach because it's food for me. So I've learned, let it go. And I tell my kids this and my friends, let it go. Just let it go fast. Forgive. Bless those people that curse you. Persecute. Bless them. Love them. Pray for them.
That's right.
Do not hold anything against anyone. Because
what about shadow people that, Evisor said I hear so much of this that people are seeing these, like even out of the corner of your eye, you'll see these shadow people.
Yeah.
Are these same entities, do you think, Jerry?
No, they're different.
They're different.
They're different. They don't speak. They're meth addicts see them all the time.
Yeah.
And they're three-dimensional shadows that are usually darker than the rest of the room.
Yes, blacker than black.
They usually don't speak. I've only heard of one story where they spoke, and it was really freaky. It scared the bejesus out of me when I was talking to this guy because the thing actually came out.
Wow. Is it their job to keep you afraid so that it feeds
Well,
them?
the Native Americans called them the Watchers. So they're actually watching you. You see them often normal people see them out of the corner of their eye.
Yes.
And then when you go to focus, there's nothing there. But meth addicts see them full up, three-dimensional shadows, often in the shape of a human being, but not always. They could be in the shape of some kind of gremlin or some kind of weird animal, but they're spooky. And if you see their eyes, I would use that as a clinical indicator. If the meth addict came into the emergency room and he saw the eyes of these shadow people, I knew he was several levels in worse shape than the ones that didn't see their eyes.
My understanding, Carol Ann, of the demonic realm is that there are levels. And there are classes of demons, starting with warrior demons for particular things like greed and murder and things like that. Territorial demons, what the Bible calls principalities that are over areas. And then it goes on down to even these little things. My youngest daughter, once saw a 3-foot kind of healthy looking gremlin thing in our family room. She was 9 years old. She came into my bedroom one morning. She says, I just saw a demon in the family room. I'm like, what? She says, yes, what did it look like? She says, it's got this tall and kind of healthy gremlin looking. And I said, well, what did you do? She says, well, I told her to go in the name of Jesus. And I said, well, what happened? She goes,
wow.
It left. And so there's all these classifications.
There's levels.
And the haunting in my house, that's all demonic. It's just another level. Because I said to my friend, what is this sulfur smell? She goes, that is a foul spirit. I said, what does a foul spirit come for? She says, they come to kill. It's come to kill you. Spiritually, emotionally, however else. We've got a lot of spiritual battles in our life, but that's my ministry, is dealing with spiritual battles with people and helping them get free. So I'm familiar with it and I'm comfortable with it. So there are different levels. And then they disguise themselves as other things. They tell people they're other things.
Yes,
there are familial spirits that go down families. They know the family line. They know the family history. So they might come and say, I'm your grandmother. No, it's not your grandmother. It's a demon.
But you can't trust. If you can't trust these things, if they come, posing as your grandmother, they may not very well be.
No, you can't trust anything they say. Nothing.
They are liars. They come to kill, steal, and destroy. And they are liars. They are constant liars.
They lie about everything.
They will
you can't make any deal with them. They won't hold any deal
into their life.
They won't keep any agreement. They won't hold any deal.
You're supposed to distinguish between, well, I guess you would feel the energy, but like if a true angelic being was in your presence, you would know, wouldn't you know you wouldn't know they're that much of.
No, they can present as almost anything.
I disagree with
the positive beings usually don't speak in words. They speak through feeling and intuition. That they very seldom speak in words.
I had an encounter with an angel when I was 25. I lived in New York City. I was raped, and I went through a tremendous trauma because of the rape. And I had a girlfriend over one night, and I lived in this little tenement building down in Turtle Bay in New York City. And I had a dream, and we were sleeping on this bed in the living room, this pull-up bed. And I had a dream that I was in this skyscraper, and I was going around, and at every floor I had to get out and fight a battle. And the dream was overwhelming. And then all of a sudden, my friend Eve and I woke up, and there was a presence in the room, and there were two windows, like on the south and the west, and then there was, a wall in the corner. And he was standing there, and this building probably had 12, 14-foot ceilings. It was an old building. He had to have been 10 feet tall, and he stood there, and he looked like a soldier. But we could see there was street light came in, so we could see his not the detail, but we could see him in the street light. And Eve started crying. She was horrified. I was horrified. I was scared to death. What is this? And Eve jumped under the covers and just cried. And I sat there, and it spoke to me telepathy, telepathically. And it said to me, God has heard your prayer to be healed of this rape. And she sent me to interpret your dream. And I said, what? And he said, God knows what your life has been like. It's been trial after trial after trial after trial after trial. He said, but this trial is about to end. He says, when you wake up in the morning, you will be healed from this rape completely. You will never have a problem with it again. And he left, and Eve came out of the covers, and she said, what did he say? And I told her. And she was shaking. It was fearful. It was fearful to see him. At the same time, he was glorious. I've never seen anything like it. I woke up the next morning, Carol Ann. I was completely healed of that rape. All the emotional trauma was gone. Well, I had stopped wearing makeup. I had stopped dressing up. I worked on Madison Avenue in advertising. I'd stopped dressing up. I had hysterical paralysis. I couldn't leave work at night unless somebody came to get me, because I couldn't walk the streets of New York alone. If somebody came to get me, I could walk. If not, I couldn't get out of my chair. And that morning when I woke up, it was gone. It never came back.
That's amazing.
Never had a problem. So I disagree with Jerry, but I mean, that's just my experience.
Now, there are people who do that, but for the most part, they don't.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think it's a common thing.
No.
I don't think it's a common thing. But I mean, I've been going to this on my lunch hour, this Episcopal church for months, praying, please heal me, please heal me, please heal me. I can't go on like this. I've had too much trauma in my life. This is too much. I can't do it. And so he sent him to heal me, and he healed me. So there's that realm too.
Yeah, I've heard stories similar to that too. One of the women she was on her deathbed, and she said that she saw this bright light come in and tell her, you're healed, and it left, and she was fine after that. So it does happen, but it's not common.
No. But when I lived in New York City, it was common for people to see. I say common. It happened from time to time for the people I knew at church to have angels appear to get them off a street, because New York was so dangerous then. They'd be walking down the street, and suddenly someone would appear behind them and say, come with me, get off the street, it's dangerous, and would take them, and then they'd turn around and that person would be gone. And they would come and tell stories about that, because New York was so dangerous. So there's that protective spiritual element also out there. But it's not common to see it. In New York we did, but it was, missionaries tell stories like that too, of being showing up to protect them, when they're being attacked in their compounds and stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know. I would think you would be able to feel the energy of an angelic being as opposed to like a demonic being. Don't you think, Jerry, that you would be able to intuitively tap into that? Like, and know the difference between good and evil? Like, isn't it in our nature to know that?
Well, the problem is that people think that their thoughts are theirs. They think that every thought that comes in their head belongs to them. So
like that mother that you communicated with that passed away, that seemed like a legit, spirit.
I felt that was legit.
Yeah, that seemed like a legit story.
And there's one time where I was flying airplanes, and we got into a situation where there was no way out of. We're going to crash and we're going to die.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like there were 3 or 4 obstacles that we had to make it over in order to survive this. And even if we made it over the barbed wire fence, there wasn't enough room to land that plane. And in the middle of that, I had this feeling overcome me, like, just sit back and watch the show. Everything's going to be okay. But it couldn't be. I mean, it couldn't be. I mean, there are 3 obstacles, and the chances of making that over all 3 of them was virtually nothing. And then even if we made it over the 3rd obstacle, there was only like 30 feet to land that plane.
Yeah.
There was no way to do it. Now, so at the last second, the guy who was flying that thing hit full right rudder and turned the whole side of the plane sideways. Okay. What should have happened? It should have hit the runway because it was still moving. The wing was now facing the direction we were moving, the tip of the wing.
Yeah.
It should have hit like this and then slammed over on the side and wrinkled its wing. It should have destroyed that wing and destroyed the undercarriage, because we virtually fell out of the air for 25 feet.
Oh my.
It didn't do that. It hit the ground and it just balanced there like this. It just stood and balanced. It shouldn't have done that. And then it slowly just tipped over.
That's crazy.
We hit so hard that I was expecting that whole undercarriage to be destroyed and the wing to be destroyed and the rips of and tears everywhere. We walked around that entire plane after that slammed into the ground from 20 feet or so, and there wasn't a scratch on it.
That sounds like an angelic.
Yes. And that feeling, like, sit back and watch the show.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just this very calm feeling, like I absolutely knowing that everything was going to be okay, but it couldn't be. It
That's
just couldn't
crazy.
be. By all rational things, it could
We
not
only
be.
have like 3 minutes left, because I can't believe 2 hours went by that fast. Like, I think I was in a time dimension loop or something. It just went so fast. But I would love to have both of you back again. There's so many more questions that I would love to be able to ask and discuss with you. Jerry and Judy, I will be in touch via email, okay? Because I really would like to schedule another one of these.
Okay.
Thank
stay
you
on.
so much.
Stay on a little bit afterward. I noticed that I don't have your email address.
Yeah, don't go anywhere. I'm going to drop you off and say goodbye, because I literally have 2 minutes left and I can't go over network time. So stick around, both of you. I'll be with you in a minute. And thank you. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, folks, time goes so quickly when we have these types of conversations. And again, thank you all for tuning in. You've been listening to Ethereal Encounters Unveiled, live on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, which is 105.3 and 107.7 FM in beautiful New Orleans. Please stay tuned. I believe Laura Lee's show is up next. Stick around, support the network. And then I believe Michelle's show is after that. I'm so bad at scheduling, so you'll have to forgive me. There's so many wonderful hosts and guests that are on this network. Please support them, follow them, show them some love. And the topics are, I could sit and watch until 3 o'clock in the morning at night, which I've done some nights. Not good, but good. But anyway, thank you again so much, all of you. Heidi, God bless. Julia, everyone in the chat, Eversor, thank you so much for, and the ones I left out, forgive me. I have like a minute left to thank you all. And of course, tomorrow, which is Friday at 3 o'clock, we are going to be airing a repeat show, pre-recorded show, not repeat, sorry, pre-recorded show. So please be sure and stay tuned. You will definitely want to tune into that show as well. Just follow us on social media. You'll be able to see all of the shows there. Thank you again so much. God bless everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for supporting the network and me. It means the world to me when you do. Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.